Lothar Matthaus was one of a kind. His career was incredibly interesting and even more incredibly long. He began playing 2 years after Pelé retired and stopped only 2 years before Cristiano Ronaldo made his debut. And don't for a second think that towards the end he was just scratching his career. No, he was the German Player of the Year at 38 years of age. He played in 5 World Cups and won virtually every trophy in the book. He was capable of playing anywhere on the pitch, and despite playing most of his career in defensive roles, he still managed to win the Ballon d'Or. Maradona referred to him as his greatest rival and the only player he was scared to face. After all, in the 9 matches where they faced each other, Maradona only managed to score once. And still, despite all of these achievements, he is often forgotten in all-time great conversations because, as much as he was a great leader, he was also a huge drama queen and disliked by many, even being banned from the national team. There's 1,000 stories to tell about Matthaus. The research for this video was exhausting, so now more than ever, enjoy. Lothar was born in Herzogenaurach, the home to the first Adidas and Puma factories. In fact, Lothar's house was right beside Puma. That means growing up, he barely saw his parents. They were always either working or too tired to pay any attention to him. But even though he felt very alone, he didn't blame them. They never wanted that life. They just ended up there as they had to flee their home country Poland to escape the Russians. Still, Lothar had to entertain himself. Even when the other kids didn't show up to play football in the streets, he just ran drills all afternoon, improving his dribbling, his weak foot, anything really. The rest of the time he worked. In school, delivering newspapers, he would go to football pitches and sell drinks he would get for cheaper at the stores, and over summer, he even joined his parents working for Puma. At 10, he finally joined his local club, but his dream wasn't to become the world's best or anything like that. He just wanted to play a match in the Bundesliga. It was like a whole world inside his TV, and he wanted to see it for himself, to make sure it was real. At 17, he made it to the first team of that same club, and in 22 matches he scored 20 goals. But still, it was only amateur football, and being just 174 centimeters tall, he wasn't very hopeful, saying, "They would always tell me it was size over skill, that I would never even be looked twice by a club like Bayern." And it seems he believed it. He was still in school, oddly enough studying to become an interior designer. One wrong move and Matthaus could have been picking out drapes for some old lady. But then something happened. Lothar grew up as a massive Borussia Mönchengladbach fan, and in 1979 his father met Hans Novak at the Puma factory, who back then supplied Borussia with kits. Novak was a former Bayern player and now Puma's public relations manager, and had insider knowledge at Borussia, so at the request of Lothar's father, he got him a trial. Once there, Lothar ran circles around Verti Vogts, and they signed him on the spot. In his first year, despite being just 18, he quite honestly just took over the whole squad. In his sort of box-to-box role, he became essential. He was incredibly complete as a footballer. No matter how short he was, Matthaus was a giant on the pitch. And even if in that first year they struggled in the Bundesliga, they were exceptional in the UEFA Cup, beating the likes of Inter, Stuttgart, and even Michel Platini's Saint-Étienne, before facing Eintracht Frankfurt in the final, with Matthaus putting them in front in the first leg, only for them to end up losing on away goals. But still, there was one more chapter that season that would make up for all of the heartbreak he had suffered. Lothar was called up for the 90-80 Euros, and despite playing just 15 minutes, Germany ended up winning it all, making it one of the greatest debut seasons of all time, and making him a European champion at the age of 18, one of the youngest ever. But despite the lack of minutes, he caused a lot of controversy, first for giving away a penalty after just 4 minutes on the pitch, and then for getting into a fight with a security guard, leading the assistant coach to claim he should do more playing and less fooling around, exposing his more controversial side and leading the media to have a field day running his name to the ground, to the point he would go on to claim his parents were ashamed of him. Over the following 2 years, he established himself as a powerhouse in the Bundesliga, but he ended up mostly watching from the bench as Germany lost the final of the World Cup to Italy after Paul Breitner made a surprising return and took over his spot. After a disappointing season that year, Borussia bounced back tremendously, and as they were bound to play Bayern in the cup final, Matthaus pulled off another crazy stunt, signing for Bayern before the match took place and betraying his coach Jupp Heynckes, who had supported him through his divorce, through his arrest for drunk driving, and his problems with the national team coaches. Even with Heynckes offering to pay for his salary raise out of his own pocket, he still forced the transfer, and once the match took place, the fans were blind with rage, chanting Judas every time Matthaus touched the ball, and to make it all worse, he would even miss the penalty that would end Bayern the cup. After disappointing at the Euros and being fined for leaving the campus in the middle of the night, he would finally arrive at Bayern, where he would become the highest paid player in the Bundesliga, and he would be worth every penny, as even though he did severely injure one of his teammates in his first training session for the club, he would take over as their new star player and lead them towards 2 consecutive Bundesliga titles. As a result of this, he was also handed a more prominent role for the national team, playing nearly every minute at the 1986 World Cup, and much thanks to him, the German national team would beat both Platini's France and Hugo Sanchez Mexico on their way to the final. But there, a different kind of beast awaited them: Diego Armando Maradona. This was to be Matthaus' greatest game, his legacy. His only task was to take care of Maradona. It was the classic, an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object, and in the end, it's hard to say who won. After 5 goals in 6 matches, Maradona had now indeed been stopped, but regardless, Germany had lost. Matthaus had fulfilled his role, but there would be no trophy for him in the end. The following year would be one of his greatest so far, winning the 3rd Bundesliga title in a row and making it to the Champions League final after scoring twice against Real Madrid, though Majer's back heel would prove too venomous for Bayern, who would end up shockingly losing the final to FC Porto. After one more year with Bayern, Matthaus announced a move to Inter for 3.6 million euros, which was absurd money back then. Maradona had just joined Napoli for 5 million, but before him, the record was just 1.75 million. Now playing in the world's strongest league, Matthaus proved no one could step up to him, taking Inter to a whole new level seemingly overnight, conquering the league title on his first season, even though Inter had been trophyless for 7 years at that point. This move also provided us with some of his best ever clashes with Maradona, with the duo being considered by many the 2 best players in the league. After a disappointing second season, greatly due to Matthaus being out injured on several occasions, it seemed it would be a year to forget, but then came the 1990 World Cup. Now captain of his national team and with the tournament being played in Italy, it was the perfect tournament for Matthaus. He scored 3 goals in 3 group stage matches and beat the Netherlands in the last 16. Then he scored the only goal against the Czech Republic before defeating England on penalties and making it to their 3rd consecutive World Cup final. This match would once again be against Argentina, once again Matthaus versus Maradona, but this time it was different. In the previous 2 seasons, Maradona had not even once been able to score in a match against Matthaus. Most of the game would go by with Matthaus keeping a tight leash on Maradona, never once letting him out of his sight, and then a penalty 5 minutes before the end of the match. Everyone looks towards Matthaus, but after having issues with his boots and suffering an ankle injury in the first half, he orders Bremer to take it instead, and he scores. West Germany are world champions. Matthaus lifts up the trophy as Maradona is seen crying in the background. Eventually, in his autobiography, Maradona would call him the best rival he ever had, perhaps the only player he was ever scared to face, and in the opinion of many, the only ever capable of stopping him. Then, to take it all up a notch, Matthaus is deployed in a more creative role in his 3rd season at Inter and goes on to score 15 goals in the opening 23 matches. As the year came to an end, with the argument that Matthaus might have just been the best player in the world gaining more and more traction, he was handed the 1990 Ballon d'Or. Still, his winning streak wasn't over, and so, in the second half of the season, after scoring against literally every opponent he faced, except for Aston Villa in the second round, Matthaus would be the star as Inter won the UEFA Cup. For his fourth and final season at Inter, Trapattoni would leave and new coach Corrado Orrico would be shocking. Suddenly, every player seemed out of form, 20 draws in 42 matches, averaging less than a goal per game, and to make it worse, Matthaus then ruptured his ACL. By the end, not only did he leave the club, so did anyone who could, and I can't blame them. Still, that mess of a season didn't stop him from winning the FIFA Player of the Year award and finishing second in the Ballon d'Or. Regardless, now 31 years old and coming off of an ACL tear, everyone knew the end was near for Matthaus. But they were all wrong. Matthaus would go on to play another 9 seasons at the highest level. On his first season back at Bayern, he still performed, even scoring the goal of the year, and then, in a tour with the national team, he was moved to a sweeper role, and it paid off tremendously. In this position, he was still able to play 40 games a season, helping Bayern win the Bundesliga once again after 3 years. If doubts over his longevity were already bad after his ACL tear, they were even worse when he tore his Achilles tendon at 34 years old. Without him, Bayern struggled massively, finishing only 6th in the league, but once again, Matthaus surprised everyone by coming back and leading them to another incredible season, beating Benfica, Barcelona and Bordeaux as Matthaus made his way to a second UEFA Cup trophy. From here on out, he went on a crazy spiral that made the final years of his career some of the most dramatic I have ever seen. As great as Matthaus was, he was never liked by people. Second-hand embarrassment came easily whenever he gave an interview. On the other hand, Klinsmann was like a diplomat, and so, with Matthaus growing older, they decided Klinsmann should take over as captain of the national team. Matthaus was furious with him, but then the national team players took Klinsmann's side and Matthaus ended up being pushed out of the team, which made him boil in anger, especially as they would win the Euros in his absence. The next season, Matthaus would even put a €5,000 bet against Klinsmann, saying that he would not score more than 15 goals all year, and even wrote a book exposing private information about him, alongside with some diary entries that clearly showed this resentment, claiming that winning the Euros would be the peak of Klinsmann's career, a clear reference to the fact that unlike Matthaus, Klinsmann would never win the World Cup. After 3 years of absence from the national team and a few more domestic trophies with Bayern, Matthaus would agree on a return at 37 years of age, replacing an injured Matthias Sommer at the 1998 World Cup, the 5th of his career. After a quarter-final exit to Croatia, Matthaus joined Bayern again, with whom he would go on an exceptional Champions League run that saw them having to beat Manchester United in the final. After a goal in under 5 minutes, Bayern were confident that they would win the whole thing. Matthaus even came off in the 80th minute as he was run to the ground trying to stop David Beckham, now that he was 39 years old. However, to the surprise of everyone that day, Man United would pull 2 goals back in injury time for one of the greatest comebacks ever. Matthaus would unfortunately be remembered as the player who quit too soon, who felt he had a trophy in his pocket already. His teammate Stefan Heffenberg would even go on to call him a quitter. Personally, I believe these claims are extremely unfair, but regardless, what has been said has been said. After one more season at Bayern where they would win all 3 domestic trophies, with Matthaus being named the German Player of the Year at 39 years of age, he would move to the New York City Metro Stars before joining the German national team for one final European Championship that would end in disaster with a 3-0 defeat to Portugal, though it made him the oldest ever player to be present in the tournament. It had been 20 years since his debut for the Germans. And finally, on his farewell match, not only did Maradona show up, he even put on the Bayern Munich shirt. It was amazing to see. So yeah, this was Lothar Matthaus' career in a video. I hope you enjoyed. Please press the like button. And I'll see you next week. Bye.